We're going to talk about some of the essentials in whitewater kayaking, as well as some things that I highly recommend you get, if not now, at some point in your kayaking career. So we're going to go in the order of how easy it is to put on your gear. So starting with what we have is called a skirt. The purpose of the skirt is to keep water out of the cockpit. There's two different types of skirts. This is the type I use. It's called a bungee because it's made of bungee and it's very stretchy. The other type of a skirt is called a ram skirt and it's made of a solid rubber. The disadvantage to that is if it's in the winter time or you're just tired, it's a lot harder to actually put the skirt on. With a bungee, it's nice and easy. Also, as a beginner or starting out in the sport, you don't really need a rand. Rands are more to stop the skirt from imploding. When you're running drops, waterfalls, big stuff like that, that's not something you're gonna have to worry about, and people run those anyways with a bungee skirt. Easy to put on, it's like a pair of pants. You're gonna either put it on by stepping into it, like so, or you can put it over your head. I prefer stepping into it. And then you wanna pull it up where the skirt is about, where the seam is about your belly button. When you sit in your kayak, it's gonna go a little bit lower, so make sure you pull it up a little more, knowing that's gonna sink down. Then after your skirt, you're gonna put on your PFD. Right here we have the two main types of PFDs. We have a type 3 and a type 5. Every single PFD is gonna have a warning label with all this information that you really don't need to know. The only thing you need to know is the sizing. It's a type 3 or type 5 and it's made for kayaking. So the type 3, Astral says that the type 3 and type 5 difference is that one, a type 3 is side entry. This, you put it on over your head and then you have a zipper here. Simple. And then all you do is go through all the buckles, make sure everything is buckled. This is called the ninja buckle at the bottom because it's very sneaky and a lot of people forget it. And then what you're going to do is you're going to start by buckling the bottom. Then I usually go to the top and then the center. Some have 2 straps, some have 3, some have 2 buckles, some have 1. All sorts of differences between PFDs and the brands. And then you have what I use, which is a type 5 PFD. The type 5 PFD is a specialty PFD. Astral says the only difference is that it goes over your head, but generally a type 5 is a rescue PFD. It has different features, like what we call a quick release. This is something that you can tie into on the back. Usually there's a metal ring on here, and then you can do things like a live bait rescue, rappelling, climbing, stuff like that. And then this allows you to get off that line. So if you're in an emergency and need to get off of it and detach from whatever you're detached to, you just pull this and it lets go. That's really the main feature of a rescue PFD that most people focus on. So this, easy enough. You just put it on over your head. One thing you can do to make it easier to put on is by undoing all the straps from the beginning, loosening them all up. And same thing, you're gonna start at the bottom, top, center, and then this has straps in the front. They're really not needed, it's more of a comfortability thing. This is called the Astral Green Jacket. And then it has a clamshell pocket, which is where I keep my knife. You want a knife with a blunt tip, so then you don't accidentally stab something. Some people will put their knife on this thing right here. I put mine in my PFD, because the more things you have hanging off your PFD, the more hazards you create because you can snag on things. The third piece of gear out of your 5 essentials is your helmet. This is going to protect your brain. Do not go cheap on a helmet. Make sure it is whitewater specific. Your brain is super important. You want to protect it. There's so many different types of helmets and types of brands. I prefer Sweet. They have the best protection. They're rated the best by Virginia Tech. It does a lot of helmet testing and they're pretty affordable. So these, it can take a little bit of adjustment to get them to be comfortable. The Sweet's very easy. They have these tabs in the back. When you pull it, it tightens this part forward. When you hit this little red button, it pulls it back. And you just throw it on your head, buckle it, and you want to make sure when you shake your head, it's not moving. You want it to be tight because if it falls off, then there's no point in wearing it at all. So to adjust these, you have these little loops on both sides that you can pull on and move around and make sure it's tight. And then I have another helmet. This is WRSI. It's a little more a pain in the butt to adjust. I don't use it. This is what I used when I first started out. It has this whole strap system in the back that you pull on and tug and you eventually get it figured out. One thing you want on your helmet is it has this little brim. The one on the WRSI is more defined. What that does is it's going to protect your temple. And then another reason for having your helmet tight is so then it doesn't rock and expose your forehead, and then you can take a hit and get a lot more injuries. This is not one of the 4 essentials, but I highly recommend it. It is called a nose plug. This goes on your nose like so, and then it stops water from entering your nose. It makes it a lot easier in the water, so you're not worried about water getting up your nose. Some people are swimmers. Some people are used to going underwater where they don't need a nose plug. I'm trying to train myself, so I don't need one. But it's a good thing to have when you're starting out, especially when you're learning to roll and rolling a lot. And then this, I just put on the helmet by running it through the strap, as you can see. Easy place to store it. And then your 4th piece of gear, that's your part of your 5 essentials, is a paddle. Generally, the easiest thing to remember as a beginner is you want to put the paddle above your head, and you want to have both of your arms at 90-degree angles, and that's going to space your paddle pretty evenly. Your knuckles are going to line up with the blade. And then when you're paddling, your right is called the control hand, and that's going to be tighter, whereas your left hand is going to be more loose. Generally, we use right-handed paddles. They do make left-handed paddles, but you do have to special order them. When you go to order it, you'll see it's a L30 or R30, that's left or right-handed. If you're left-handed, I suggest that you learn how to paddle with a right-handed blade, because if you lose your paddle, generally you're not going to find a left-handed paddle, you're going to be handed a right-handed paddle. A few things about your kayak paddle. There's different types. This is a carbon fiber. Generally what people use once they get into the sport and they're more invested. They're super lightweight, super durable. This is not going to flex at all. You get more power out of it. Then you have plastic paddle. Those flex a lot more. They're heavier, but they are a good entry-level paddle. I used when I started. They're cheap. Then you have kind of the mid-range, which is a fiberglass paddle. It's lighter weight, more durable, which means more power, but it's not going to be as lightweight as a carbon fiber paddle. One thing that a lot of people do is they put electrical tape. It creates a nice grip so your hand doesn't slide around as much. Paddle is going to have what we call a offset. As you can see, the blade is not completely lined up. This, I believe, is a 30-degree paddle. Generally, your standard paddle is going to be a 30-degree paddle. There's arguments about what offset actually is helpful for. How I understand it, offsets were used as a way to cut through the wind. The higher the blade angle, the easier it is going to be to cut through the wind, but most of the time when we're paddling, it doesn't really matter. Your offset, it's a whole preference thing. Try different ones, see what you like. Then you have different lengths. I believe this is a 197. Generally, the taller you are, the bigger the blade you want, because you're higher above the water, so you need more reach. The shorter you are, the shorter the blade. But then we also have wooden paddles. Super expensive, super durable. The nice thing about it is you can repair it over and over and over. These, if it breaks, you have to replace the whole blade. Snaps in half, you need to basically get a new paddle or a new shaft. I don't have an example of it because I don't use it, but we also have different kind of paddle shafts. You have a straight shaft like I had, and then you also have a bent shaft. Bent shaft makes it easier for some people because it kind of shows where you need to grip it, and it's generally used for people with more wrist issues. And then you have paddles that break apart into either 2 or 4 pieces, and you can actually adjust the angle on the fly. Those are great to put in the back of your boat if you need something as a spare, as a backup. So besides your boat, those are the 4 pieces of gear that are essential. You have your helmet, you have your skirt, you have your PFD, and you have a paddle. And then, of course, you have your boat. That would be your 5th piece of gear. As I showed you, we got nose plugs, and I'm going to show you some other pieces of gear that you might want on the river as well. These are something I've been using a lot more recent. They are called ear plugs. Ear plugs keep the water out of your ears, obviously. The reason we use this, a lot of the rivers we're paddling are below 70 degrees. When the water is below 70 degrees, that water can actually get into your ears, stimulate bone growth, and create what we call surfer's ear. Surfer's ear has to be surgically worked on, and it can be pretty expensive. It's not about if you'll get surfer's ear, it's about when. If you paddle long enough without earplugs, you will get it, especially in cold water. Highly recommend. People's argument against them is you can't hear. These you can hear pretty well. You can hear enough. That's why we have different hand signals that we'll go over at a later time that we use on the water, because you can't hear people most of the time anyways. Then we have elbow pads. Elbow pads I highly recommend if you're doing shallow or steep creeks. When you hit your elbow, you'll learn why you want these. They protect them really well and can take a nice hit, especially on shallow waters. It never feels good when you hit your elbows. $30 on Amazon to save your elbows. It's worth it. Then we have dry bags. Everyone carries stuff that they probably don't want to get wet, like your cell phone, first aid kit, food, etc. The only dry bag I will ever recommend to anyone is Watershed. Watershed is the only dry bag I've ever used that actually stays dry. Everything else I've used gets wet. They are pretty expensive, but you're protecting things that are expensive, like the phone, your wallet, your keys. They work by having kind of like a zip lock function, and then you roll it down and it keeps the water out. That'll run you about 150 bucks. Two more things I want to talk about and then we'll be done are shoes. Shoes are super important. Kind of wish I was wearing them now because my feet are burning on this porch. Many different types of shoes. These are booties. They're just made of neoprene. They're great for when I'm in a playboat. If I try to wear like these regular Astrals, kind of like tennis shoes that have water drainage, I can't fit. So I'll use these in a creek boat. Better grip, kind of like wearing a normal shoe. And then these are NRS Freestyles, I believe they're called. They kind of wear out pretty quickly, but they have pretty good grip and they're great for fitting in a thing like a playboat. And finally, something we use often is a dry top. It's going to keep most of the water out of your boat and keep you dry. A dry top is going to keep you dry for the most part. Only thing that usually gets in is your sweat, or if the gaskets are growing bad and pretty well worn, you'll start to get a little bit of water in. But these are great. These are awesome when it's cold out. It's getting warm out, so we're not going to need them as much. You have different types. You have the long sleeve ones, which are full dry tops. Then you have what are shorties, which are short sleeve versions. And they all have gaskets to keep the water out. And then you have splash tops, kind of like a over-exaggerated raincoat. It's gonna keep you kind of dry, but not really. And that's all we have for you today. So those are the pieces of equipment that are essential, the 4 pieces. Let's go over them again. Skirt, PFD, helmet, paddle, and then some of the suggested gear I carry with me as well. You can go back through the video if you need to review any of that information, and I'll see you on the river.